Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
Episode 9 of the G5 Classified podcast is here. Gabe Kuhn, Kyron Samuels with you. Kai, what's happening, brother? How's it going?
Going good, man. We had a pretty eventful weekend, so a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm glad to get into it.
College football ain't giving us a week off, bro.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. But it's another week. We're about halfway through the season, right? And it's another sort of spot or point in time where it feels like Georgia is at the peak of the college football universe. I know Oregon is number one in the country. I think they rightfully deserve it. They handled Ohio State. But what Georgia did to Texas this weekend was criminal, quite frankly. 30-15. They had the fans all frustrated. We'll talk about the defensive holding call, but I want to start with Glenn Schumann and that defense and what they were able to accomplish. And really, it's about the first half stats. He forced Sark into an insane quarterback switch, like just a very desperate quarterback switch going from Quinn Ewers to Arch Manning, then back to Quinn Ewers in one of the biggest games of the year. But he held that Texas offense, who had been rolling all year, to 38 yards total, 2 yards rushing. Impressive performance from a guy who I think will have his hands on his own program here soon.
Glenn Schumann is a guy that I've been beating the table for years to get his own program. And I know he's had some conversations behind the scenes where he's had opportunities to put his name in the hat for a little G5 school or FCS program before, but he's at such a good position as the defensive coordinator at the University of Georgia that I don't know that he would leave for just any job. I know he interviewed for the Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator spot over the offseason, so that was interesting. Maybe he had some NFL aspirations, but he did a fantastic job, man. I mean, I know there's a simulated pressure that they put on Quinn Ewers that's going around, everybody circulating, and it's amazing, man. It's just hard because it's a buzzsaw. What do you really do with that look? I mean, if you know football, you know defense, you know pressures, it's almost impossible to do anything with that look, especially under the circumstances that Quinn was in. He was already a little bit spooked. He kind of reminded me of Beck in the first half of the Alabama game. He was already a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of just his game poise and the way he was feeling the game. So it was definitely an interesting start to the game, and I just love how they jumped on him early because for me, I picked Georgia to win the game. I thought they would win the game by 10 points. I didn't think it would look the way it looked Saturday night, though. I thought that was just an ass kicking that nobody really saw coming. And one thing I really want to give Kirby Smart his flowers because people were giving Kirby shit for that post-game speech. And I'm like, did we watch the same pregame shows? Did we listen to the same radio shows? Did we see the same people tweeting and talking about the game? Everybody thought the Texans were going to win this game. I saw
right.
If I had to put, a percentage point, I would say 80, 85% picked Texas to win the ball game. You look at the College Game Day crew, almost all of them picked Texas to win that ball game. There was not a lot of people that thought Georgia could win this game, especially after the Alabama game. So he was right. A lot of people did doubt them. A lot of people didn't think they would be able to do that. They went there and kicked their ass. So I thought that was really dope. And shout out to Kirby for giving that type of speech and getting his guys back in it because it could have been really hard for him to get that seat back in the fold after the Alabama game. And they struggled against Mississippi State a little bit too. So seeing him be able to get them to play their best football in that big game was amazing.
Yeah, I understand that people are going after Kirby for his post-game remarks and, holding that chip on his shoulder, even though they are the University of Georgia and they, are the favorites coming into every single college football season. He's the guy who's the favorite to take the mantle from Nick Saban. We know how it goes. But at the same time, yeah, I agree with you. Like most people were picking Texas going to this game, especially with it being in Austin, especially with what we had seen from Georgia going into this game. Georgia played really close with Kentucky. They lost to Alabama. They played close with Mississippi State. I think there was a lot of people that were all over that Texas bandwagon. Now, what'd you think about the defensive holding call that ended up not being a defensive holding call? And obviously it's the third quarter. Carson Beck throws an interception. Arian Smith, maybe a tiny tug, but really no, it was a ticky-tack holding call. Texas takes it back to the 9. Texas fans start throwing things all over the field, and then, they clear the field of all the trash and the litter, and then 10 minutes later, we realize that they have completely switched the call, and Texas has the ball at the 9 going in. That was a strange precedent. I know Kirby was animated as we've ever seen him about that particular situation, but I don't blame him, man. That was precedent to set.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at it was just a total failure from the referees all around. I mean, the initial call was terrible. The way they handled the situation with the crowd was crazy. And then you come back and they reverse the call. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And like you said, it is a dangerous precedent to set. And we're talking about within the realm of sport here. Like I know a lot of people were likening Kirby's statement to some of the stuff that's happened with him in the offseason. And I mean, come on, I think you guys are being a little dense here. I don't think we have to go there, but it is a dangerous precedent to set within the realm of sport because, it's going to happen every time people don't like a call on the field, especially in these big games and these big atmospheres and these big environments.
Just
Alabama
throw shit on the field. You'll get it switched.
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's say, Alabama and Tennessee game. I mean, that fourth down was very questionable, but they could have thrown, bottles on the field. Would they have overturned that? It's just something that we shouldn't be having a precedent set on that. And I think Kirby was well within his right to be upset about that for sure.
All right, now I have a real question for you because Carson Beck threw another 3 picks and in his biggest games of the year against Alabama and now against Texas. Sure, he came out victorious against Texas, and he ended up in the second half really going hard and racking up some yards against Alabama till that final interception. But 6 interceptions combined in those 2 games. And then I want to talk about Quinn Ewers on the other side. Like, it just feels like there's something missed. What did you make of the quarterback play in this game? I thought there was a lot to be desired. Obviously, both defense is pretty solid, but both these 2025 NFL draft prospect quarterbacks, guys that are supposed to be first rounders, they did not convince me that they should be drafted in those positions.
Yeah, I'll start with Beck because I think Quinn is pretty cut and dry. Beck was a little bit more interesting to me because he got in a situation where he started off the game on a roll. I mean, he looked really damn good, but there was like 3 or 4 drops that helped him, get off the field quick and kind of kill those drives. And as a quarterback, I can imagine how that would kind of weigh on you a little bit. And he still kept throwing them. I mean, he kept ripping it. He kept letting it go. They threw the ball a lot more than I thought they would early coming out. So I thought he did a decent job early. And then he has the interception. Then he comes back, and there was the one that they ended up calling the DPI on. That's like the 3rd time this season that he's had a miscommunication with Arian Smith, and it's cost him an interception. So some of them, like, I don't know how I scored that in my head. Like, at one point, it was a miscommunication. It's very clear. Arian Smith is running a different route, the same way he was stalk blocking in the Alabama game while he's throwing, Beck is throwing a tunnel screen to him, and it gets picked off. Another one happens where it gets dropped. So I don't know if I count those against Beck. I'm not 100% sure in my brain, but it counts as an interception on the stat sheet. It looks terrible when you sit there watching the film. And some of those decisions are like, all right, bro, he's not there. Obviously, you should be able to discern that pretty quickly. So I think he played. If I give him a grade, I'm still going to give him a B-. I thought, given the situation, given the atmosphere, the way he responded, he came back after Kirby talked about it, where Beck just is resilient. He came back time and time again. And even the Alabama game, we talk about that game, he comes back time and time again, and he delivers some of his best football in the biggest moments. And even, I know people give him a lot of hell for that back shoulder fade he threw at the Alabama game. I didn't at all. That's how they got back in the game. He was throwing the ball up, giving this guy a chance to make a play, and he kept doing it. And on the last play, Kobe Young, didn't go up for the ball, didn't have great body position. It wasn't a perfect throw by any means. I'm not saying that, but to me, it's a game style instead of something I'm looking at like I think it's a detriment to him. I think these are correctable mistakes for Beck, and I think he's a very good quarterback. Quinn, I just think doesn't have it. I think he's played 2 really good ball games against Alabama and Michigan, and I'll even throw in the Big 12 title game. But other than that, he's up and down. Very talented arm, but I don't really see it overall with him.
Yeah, now Carson Beck, I think, has good, more than enough talent. I think he's a smart quarterback. I really believe that, even though he's thrown 6 picks in those 2 biggest games of the year. Right. So I'm still there on Carson Beck, although I think he's dropped down my rankings to a certain extent. So he's first rounder.
I have to say that too, 100%. I had him QB1 coming into the season.
Right,
he's no higher than QB3 right now.
Yeah, now Quinn Ewers, man, I like he's almost in that second day territory for me at this point. It's just like when you ask him to be accurate, when you ask him in the biggest moments of the year to place the ball, he can't quite do it. Now, obviously, he has those flashes, but I'm tired of talking about flashes. I don't want to see flashes. I want to see consistency. There's quarterbacks that we watch day to day, week to week in college football who have shown consistency in placing the football. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders are the 2 at the top of my list right now. And hell, like I've been watching Cade Klubnik over at Clemson. I know we put out our Heisman rank or sort of hype rankings, and I had him at number 5 because he's been rolling. He's a guy who's been placing the ball pretty well now against not so good competition. But Quinn Ewers, man, there's just something amiss when he is asked to consistently place the football, he's not as accurate as we once thought. And I understand he was the most highly rated, highly decorated quarterback recruit that has come out in the past 20 years since we've been doing recruiting rankings. But there's just something missing. And if you deny that, I think you're being very naive at this particular moment. Now, I want to move on to this. Is Alabama okay, Kai? 2 losses in their last 3 times out, man. And they got handed one by Tennessee, and Tennessee's a good team. Last time they were in Neyland, they lost. So this is, they've set a trend here. Tennessee has that nice little win streak working at home against Alabama the last 2 times out. But this game, man, is defined by a couple of things. In the trenches, I really don't think that they stuck in there like they should. Dylan Sampson's not some big-bodied running back who should take 26 carries for 139 yards. And I know he's a good back, and he's ran for 845 yards so far this year, but I thought Alabama would be able to stand up to that a little bit differently. I thought they played awesome. Defense in the first half held him down, but the second half they started to let him get loose. They started to let Nico get loose a little bit. The next thing I look at is they're way too reliant on Jalen Milroe hero ball. And if Jalen Milroe doesn't have it that night, they're kind of screwed. And it's sort of a double reliance, if you will, because I think offensively, Kalen DeBoer is very reliant on Jalen Milroe, but Jalen Milroe is far too reliant on Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams had 20 targets in this game, only caught 8 of them for 73 yards. Outside of that, you got to see more from Kendrick Law. You got to see more from these CJ Deepray. You got to see more from these guys if this offense wants to stay as consistent as they want to be. And they're not converting on third downs well enough. They're having some struggles there. And then the third thing, and I think we have sometimes a short memory about this because everybody's going to say, well, Nick Saban didn't have these issues. Well, he did at the end. I mean, he had 17 penalties last time they played in Neyland. But Alabama they have a penalty issue. They're 130th out of 134 in the country. They commit 9 penalties a game. They had 15 for 115 in this game against Tennessee. So I think there's a lot of things working against Alabama here. And, to answer this question that we have here up on the screen, is Alabama okay? No, I don't think they're okay at this moment. Doesn't mean that they can't rebound, but right now they have to do some soul searching.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think the short answer is no. The big picture answer is I'm going to say that they will be okay. I hate what I'm seeing a lot of the times because I'll say it will be okay because most of it is self-inflicted. I haven't seen a team just come out there and just kick their ass for 4 quarters. I think Vanderbilt did a really good job of keeping the foot on the pedal and making Alabama have to work. The second half, Alabama did pretty good offensively. They still did fairly well defensively. They held them to I believe it was 3.7 yards per carry in the second half. But still, I don't feel like Vandy dominated them for 4 quarters. Tennessee definitely didn't dominate them for 4 quarters. That was the game where it's mostly self-inflicted. I mean, it came down to this for me. You have 3 turnovers in the first half, and you get 0 points off of those turnovers. And then you have 15 penalties, and Jalen Milroe plays the worst game of his life. I know there's speculation about an injury, and, I talk to people behind the scenes. And what they're saying is nobody's 100% this point in the season, which is true. So
yeah, it's week 9. Right. Not sure you can do about it.
If he has an injury, if he does have an injury, it doesn't really matter to me. That's immaterial. What I do think is important is that he should never throw the ball 27 times in one half. I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes. To me, that's never conducive to winning football. And he had only thrown the ball more than 35 times, I believe, twice in his career before this game. And he had 27 before the half. To me, that's a losing recipe. And they came out today, said they haven't been forcing the ball to Ryan Williams. Well, I think a little bit of that, it's a half truth, right? Yes, a lot of that is scheme targets because he's that type of player. You need to get him, at least in my opinion, those 8 to 12 targets a game minimum. But there is a sweet spot too. I think, like you said, the offense is too reliant on Jalen Milroe, and Jalen Milroe is too reliant on Ryan Williams. I thought that was perfectly said because I think that's a safety valve. It's 100,000 people. The offensive line has done well in pass protection, but they haven't been perfect. And that's just a safety valve for him to be able to, hey, Ryan's down there somewhere. I'm going to find Ryan. I'm going to throw to Ryan. And the caveat to that is if he hits those throws, we're talking about this entirely different because Ryan Williams was open on at least 3 or 4 of those that could have been big plays, and those are plays that Milroe normally hits. So I'm going to use this game like the Texas game from last year, where I'm going to consider it an outlier. I thought he didn't play great against South Carolina, but he rebounded very well in the second half. He played well in the second half. They won that game to do what they needed to do. I haven't seen him play a game this bad since the Texas game, and I think that this game was even worse than the Texas game. So I'm not counting on Jalen Milroe to ever play that poorly again. He's shown that he can bounce back from those type of situations. And I think that overall they will be okay. But what is okay for Alabama fans is playoffs, SEC championship. So go ahead.
What bothers me about this Alabama team is we've seen the peak of them as could potentially be the best team in college football.
Yep.
But we also have seen them play like a middling team in the SEC.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like there's these polls with Kalen DeBoer in year one, and I don't blame him for having them because he's got to have control of the Saban guys. It's new surroundings. He's got to get used to expectations. Like there's a lot of reasons that this could be the case. But I remember Nick Saban coach teams, even in some bad turnouts, that lower poll was never this low. You know what I mean? Like that bad game that they had, they'd still pull out against Arkansas by 3. Now they're losing those games, and it's turning the opposite direction on them. Where it's just something's got to flip on here. Someone's got to step up within that locker room and make sure that some of these mistakes get nipped in the bud, that they can make some things happen.
Yeah, 100%. And last thing, wrapping up here, the shout out to Alabama fans. Like we have to stop the whole, this didn't happen under Nick Saban. This didn't happen under Nick Saban. Yes, it did, man. I think what you said is 100% true. That Saban-led teams found a way to win more often, but it's been 7 games, man. Look at how many situations last season. We won't even have to go back to Bryce Young's tenure and how many times he saved Alabama by him just being a dude. But look at last season. The Arkansas game easily could have been a loss. Texas A&M game easily could have been a loss. Auburn game should have been a loss. Michigan game, they lost that game, but that's another situation where they didn't follow through when they had a lead. They had a 20-13 lead with a 4th down to get off the field and end that ball game. And it didn't happen. The defense got shredded. They went down and they scored, went to overtime, couldn't get it done. It's happened under Nick Saban, and that's just last season. I'm not even talking about 2022 and 2021 where it happened a bevy of times, but Bryce Young and Will Anderson were the panty buttons. And I think that's the thing that this team doesn't have yet is a Bryce Young, Will Anderson button. We've seen Milroe play very well. The Georgia game, I mean, he's played as good as any quarterback I've seen this season. But you can't count on that week in and week out from Jalen Milroe. Anybody for that matter. So Alabama fans, stop that. It's been like this for a while. The whole saying that any team can beat you on any given week hasn't always been true. But the last 4 or 5 years, it's been shown that literally anybody can be beat. And Alabama has been teetering on this line for a long time.
And here's the thing that I even more so than fans, Kai, and I want to know how you feel about this. Former players need to be a little bit more quiet. They need to calm the hell down.
I'm glad you said that
because AJ McCarron went on a podcast, and I'm good. Like Neil McCready and Tyler Siskey do a hell of a job, and AJ does a good job on that most of the time. But he said one thing about this Alabama team. He said they're way too worried about fucking TikTok. Well, listen, you got to understand. Everybody in the country is dealing with that. This is a new age athlete. We don't have the Chance Warmacks and we don't have all these guys from back when you were playing. We don't have any, old school type run the ball, don't have social media, not trying to make a buck, all for the team guys. We don't really have that anymore in college football. So like Kalen DeBoer, Kirby certainly struggles with it. Everybody's struggling with these same things, man. And for you to just do the whole, they're worried about fucking TikTok. It just you sound so aged and so misguided. It feels like you are just too far removed from the game that you shouldn't be necessarily talking about this type of athlete, because these athletes are all like that at this point in time.
100%. Shout out to my girl Goat Latia. I'll holler at her and let her know I said this, but he posted a video, quote tweeting it, with a video in the locker room for, I believe it was 2016 or 2017 Alabama. Both of those teams went to national championships, right? They're in the locker room doing the mannequin challenge from the Ray Sherman song.
Right, yeah.
Doing the Black Beatles song. They've been doing this for years. Talking about Alabama has never been a type of team that engaged in banter back and forth. Did y'all watch Reuben Foster play? Did you watch Ryan Henderson?
Right, exactly. Right.
That team was full of savages.
Ronnie Harrison almost knocked out one of his teammates on the sideline one year.
That team was full of savages. Ronnie Harrison. Do you guys remember Ronnie Harrison?
Yeah, I remember Ronnie Harrison.
Those type of guys were on that team, and we need more of those guys on Alabama team. People were talking about Malachi Moore, and shout out to my guy Rich Ragland, a former Alabama player. We grew up and we played some high school ball together. He said, I would take 100 Malachi Moores over some of the guys that I see out there. I need everybody pissed off where they're kicking the ball. And he acknowledges that he went too far. But that's not a character assassination. You need 100 of those guys. And it's okay to have fun in the locker room. We've done it. We did it when we were in college.
Of course.
It's happened a million times. So that was stupid. I'm glad you pointed it out for the former players. What they want to do is go back to the glory days. It's not the same, bro. You were in college in 2012, 2013. That was over a decade ago. It's not the same, man.
If you want to see Alabama have success and not have to deal with that Saban shadow all the time, stop doing that shit. That's not helping anything with that program. That's not helping Kalen DeBoer run a healthy program. That's not helping him with having a healthy fan base. So if you want Alabama to have success, what you're doing is completely obviously, I know it's small and it's minute, and you could say, well, you could just sort of throw it to the side and be like, I'm not going to make that big a difference. But Alabama fans listen to you. That contributes to the negativity that team's going to continually get.
Recruits listen to this shit. They have the number one recruit class in the country, but that shit goes viral. You think a kid that's watching Dan Lanning in Oregon and they record every single thing that they do, they have a locker room, they do every single thing and put it on social media. Colorado, where they have every rapper in the country on the sideline, every politician, every celebrity is at Colorado games. You don't think kids see that shit and want to go play for an environment like that, as opposed to like, oh my God, I can't drop a pass, or there's going to be 1,000 people in my inbox, or I can't make a mistake and have a penalty, or there's going to be 1,000 people in my inbox and 3 all-pros talking shit about me on Twitter.
God forbid I drop a touchdown pass and I post it on TikTok that day.
Like,
mercy me.
It's silly, man.
It is. It's ridiculous. But that's something I noticed. Like, you can talk about the fan base, and I know that fan base is rabid, but I think some of the former Saban players, they need to chill the hell out. It's getting out of hand, in my opinion. Now, it's kind of funny. We talked about the SEC, and you have Tennessee with a loss, even though they beat Bama. You have Georgia with a loss because Alabama beat them. Texas loses to Georgia. Everybody has a loss in the SEC, but there's 2 teams in the SEC that have yet to lose in conference play, and they're battling this weekend for the top of the SEC. Kind of unlikely. You have number 8 LSU going to A&M, number 14 in the country. A&M 2.5-point favorites. I mean, shout out to both these teams, man. They have risen to the top in a really, really tough year. Now, granted, I don't know if either team has been fully as battle tested as I want them to be at this point in the season, but this is going to be the first big test for both of them to see actually who can take the top of the standings.
100%. Like you said, shout out to both of those teams, especially Elko. I'll give him an extra little bit here because
year one,
that was a team that lost a ton of guys, and they got some guys too. I mean, they were able to get some players like Des Ricks, I believe the William Lee kid. They were able to get some kids in, but that was a team that not many people expected much from, including myself. I expected 8-4 type of year for them. I mean, look, it's still early in the season. It still could happen.
Don't get it twisted.
But they've started much better than anybody thought they would. And I think they have a very real shot to win this ball game. And I got to give credit to Brian Kelly as well. I'm not the biggest BK fan, and that's pretty well noted here. There's a couple guys, BK and Lincoln Riley, that I'm not the biggest fans of, just going to be honest. But rebounding after that USC loss, which was turning out to be a little bit of an embarrassing loss at this point. It's not going to be a quality loss on their resume, regardless if USC wins out or not. They have rebounded well. I don't think they played great. I think they could have lost the Ole Miss game for certain, but they found a way to win ball games, and that's all that matters in the SEC. So shout out to them, and I think this is going to be a very close, contested ball game. But I look at this on paper, and nothing really separates them. So what I'm going to do is just go with the team that has the most dudes, and I think LSU has the most dudes. I think when it's nut cutting time, I trust Kyron Lacey to go make a play. When it's nut cutting time, C.J. Daniels is back healthy, and he had a pretty good game. Nussmeier, he's unafraid to let it rip in big moments. He's not always been perfect.
That's for sure.
He has some faults for sure. But when the moments are big, I know he's not going to be too scared to let it rip. I know he's not going to be a guy that gets scared. And another thing, the LSU offensive line is rounded into form. They're finally starting to look like the offensive line that we thought they would look like before the season. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, and those guys. So I think that I'm going to go with LSU in a close ball game. But I think these are 2 very good football teams that still may struggle. Like after this, who knows? They could both lose 2 or 3 more ball games. But for right now, I think they both deserve a lot of credit for where they are.
Yeah, I got to be honest, man. Like I watched that game, and I picked Arkansas to cover last week. Not on this show. I went 3-0 on this show, not to brag. But I watched them last week against Arkansas, and I picked Arkansas to cover, and I thought everything came together for them last week. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but Caden Durham ran for 100 yards. They held Arkansas, who's been running the ball at will for the most part this year. I think 38 yards on 29 attempts. Garrett Nussmeier at least played on schedule. Like I everything about that win last week got me back on their side. Like, okay, this is heading in the right direction. They're rounding into form. They're getting everything to come together for once, offense, defense, special teams. Didn't turn the ball over either. I thought that was nice.
And shout out to the defensive end, Braden Swinson. He's having a hell of a season. He's a guy that I liked, but I wanted to see him put it all together in terms of next level prowess. I do evaluation and scouting for people and stuff like that. And he's a guy that's like, hey, maybe needs a year. He's rounded into form. He looks damn good. He's up there towards the top of the SEC in sacks and the country in sacks. And I think he's turning out to be a ball player that can really boost his draft stock to that early top 75, top 100. I don't want to go further than that at this point, but he's made a lot of money for himself this season, and the season's still young.
Yeah. Now, I asked earlier if Alabama's okay. There's a team in college football, a top 10 brand in college football that is not okay, like truly not okay. And that is that's USC. They've lost 3 straight games. They are 5-9 in their last 14. They lost to Maryland on the road, 29-28. They've blown 2 straight leads, second half leads of 14 points or more. I don't know what to say, because sometimes you could talk about late game execution and blown leads, and you could not put that on a coach. You could say, oh, that's a one-off. But the more this keeps happening, the more this just becomes who Lincoln Riley is as a guy and who this program is on the surface. And once you start to fall into line with what we think you are, and you lose this many games in this span, 5-9 is what Hugh Freeze has been in his last 14 games. And we're all over Hugh Freeze. At some point you are who you are. And that's sort of how I feel about USC. They're a middle of the line Big Ten team. And that's just what they are going to be under Lincoln Riley, and says, unless something drastic changes.
Yeah, I'm 100% agreement there. And another stat that just kind of it dumbfounds me. They are 11-11 since the Pac-12 championship game, or excuse me, since the Tulane game they lost in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
That includes a tenure with Caleb Williams. You went 18-8 during the Caleb Williams era. Now you're 11-11 in your last 22. This is just who they are. They found a way to lose 4 ball games this season. The Michigan game had a lead, needed a stop, couldn't get a stop. Minnesota game had a 7-point lead with 6 minutes left, couldn't finish that game. In that game, they had a 17-7 tie, only ran the ball twice for the last 8 minutes of the game. This past week against Maryland, they had a 28-14 lead with 2 running backs that average. One averages 6 yards a carry, the other averages 9 yards a carry. They ran the ball 4 times after that. After they took a 14-point lead halfway through the third quarter, they ran the ball 4 times after that. They're throwing the ball more than any other team in the Lincoln Riley era by 5 percentage points. They're 3rd in the FBS in passing attempts per game. This is not adding up. This is 100% on coaching. You have people calling for Miller Moss's job. The kid threw for 3.
What's he doing wrong? I don't understand that.
Behind one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in the country, by the way. You have him throwing the ball the 3rd most in the country. That's 100% on coaching. You have 2 backs who can get you 6 yards a pop. They are literally averaging over 6 yards a pop, and you refuse to run the ball in late game situations. He was asked about it today, and he says, we've been in a lot of late game situations in the 2-minute warning where it's kind of inflated the numbers a little bit, so we're not really looking at it as a whole. And I'm like, 1, if you run the damn ball, you won't be in those 2-minute situations because the game will be over, you'll bleed the clock, and you'll score more points. 2, you haven't been effective enough in those situations for them to inflate the number enough. You're going 3 and outs in these situations and giving the ball back to the other team. So it is something that needs to change, and it's just who Lincoln Riley is. I'm tired of making excuses for the guy. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind, and that's what makes it even more disappointing, is because we've seen what you can do. And he's done it with some talent that he has. The Spencer Rattler Oklahoma team was not as talented offensively as this USC team. He has 5 legitimate wide receivers. They have 5 guys that have over 20 catches. Jacoby Lane, Zachariah Branch, Kyron Hudson, Deuce Robinson, and Mekhi Lemon are all probably going to play on Sunday in some form or fashion. And this shouldn't be a thing. You found a way to lose 4 separate ball games where you had a lead in the 4th quarter. You had a 7-point lead or more in 3 of those games. It's simply unacceptable. And I'm tired of hearing about resources. I'm tired of hearing about this and that. Right. You have plenty enough talent. The fact that you're in these games and winning these ball games up until a certain point shows that you have more than enough talent. I don't want to hear about the Big Ten being too physical because you run the ball on everybody that you played. When you run the ball, it's simply about coaching, and it stops there. I'm tired of people piling on Miller Moss. I'm tired of people piling on the defense who needs to get stops in late game situations, but they won't even be in these situations if they were better coached.
Listen, I have always stood by you learn how to win and you learn how to lose. This program has learned how to lose, and they're on this path where every time they play a Big Ten team, Big Ten opponent, they find a way to lose, to grab a loss from the jaws of victory. So I'm getting sick of trying to make excuses for this man. It's over with. It's over with.
Get any easier
and here's like the other part is like some people will just chalk it up and be like, look how close they are. Like Penn State, they had this 14-point lead in the second half, and Penn State's number 4 in the country or whatever the hell they were when you played them. Well, at the same time, you know who was always close when they joined the Big Ten? Always really close and never won? Nebraska. Yep. You want to fall in line with another national brand that was always close? Oh, they're right there on the doorstep. They play all these one-score games. Well, they lose all these one-score games. When you create that trend tends to continue. So you got to be careful with where you're at with this program, man. And I don't really, I think I agree with you. It comes down to being smarter as a play caller, because I think their defense has been a little bit more physical this year. They got to get more physical on the offensive side of the football, by the way, in the trenches. But man, there's some changes that need to be made, and I'm not envious of the person in Lincoln Riley who's going to have to make those changes.
Yep. Last thing here, we can move on. This is a crazy stat from Paolo Uggetti on Twitter. USC has held a fourth-quarter lead in all 7 of their games this season and has a losing record. Over the last 20 seasons, over 200 teams have had a fourth-quarter lead in all 7 games. Only one other team has a losing record in that 20-year span, and that was Utah State in 2011. It is a historical streak of losing ball games with the lead. We have literally only seen it one other time within the last 20 seasons of football. It's inexcusable, and there's nothing to point to but the coaching. So,
all right, now let's fly through these winners and losers. I'm going to go with my winner of the week. Comes from Georgia. Give me their linebacker / edge, whatever the hell you want to, term him as. Micah Parsons light. That's how he played this game against Texas. But give me Jalen Walker against number 1 Texas this past weekend. 8 solo tackles, 3 sacks, 3 TFLs, and a fumble recovery. The guy was all over the place. Every time you looked up, number 11 was making a play. And it's kind of funny because I think he's going to be in the NFL at some point, but I wonder how they're going to deal with his, where he projects and what he's going to be at the next level, because he really can rush the passer coming off of the edge. And maybe he's a little bit too big or a little bit too burly as an off-ball linebacker. I don't know how this is all going to play out, but he's very versatile. And I know that Glenn Schumann's been trying to expose that and show that to other teams when he runs them out there every week.
100%. He's a damn good player. My winner of the week is really cut and dry. It's Vanderbilt. They're 5-2. They squeaked by Ball State. That was a damn good ball game. They ended up winning by 10 points, but it was very competitive throughout. And they ended up getting ranked in the top 25. That's how you know Vanderbilt's get some respect out here. They're pulling some rank. They got an Alabama win. They got a Kentucky win. They're a very good team. The 2 losses that they have, one is to Missouri in overtime. The other one is a last-minute game to Georgia State, which is funny now when you look at it, Georgia State. But They play really good football. Every game they've had a chance to win. Now they're a top 25 ball club. Nobody saw this coming. Shout out to Jerry Kill and those guys. They added to the staff with Clark Lee that helped you get to this point. But Vanderbilt is a team that a lot of people think have a chance against Texas this weekend. So we'll see them. And I don't think that they have a chance against Texas, but they've earned enough respect. They're a top 25 team, and that's a huge deal for Vanderbilt in that program.
I love you saying a lot of people. A lot of people think they have a chance against Texas. Not me. Not me. I don't think they have a chance, but a lot of people do. But it's kind of funny. I just have to add this before we move on from your winner. Have you seen like number 23, number 24, number 25 in the AP poll? You have Army, Navy, Vandy. That's just like it's just blows my mind. Blows my mind. Strange times in college football. My loser of the week, I'm going to go with Dylan Raiola in Nebraska. They got absolutely blown the fuck out by Indiana 56-7. And that was when Curtis Rourke, the whole second half, the 5th year or 6th year transfer from Ohio, who's been lighting up everybody in the Big Ten so far for Indiana, he was out for the whole second half. They didn't have a comeback in them. And it's kind of funny, like you could sit there and be like, well, Indiana's been blowing out everybody. Well, at least a lot of the teams that Indiana's been playing have been putting up some numbers on the offensive side of the ball. That did not happen with Nebraska. Obviously, they couldn't run the ball, but Dylan Raiola looked like as much of a freshman as I've seen this entire year. He's a little too damn nonchalant back there in the pocket. He was staring down receivers because Indiana's defensive line was bearing down on him a little bit more. They have a little bit more pass rush than he's used to. But that was a freshman if I've ever seen it. He was 28 for 44, 234, 3 interceptions. Just not what you want. Not what you want. And I fear just sort of watching that game, and he ended up getting replaced by the end of it once it really got out of hand. Like, I hope that's not a game where he loses a whole bunch of confidence, because that's definitely one of those confidence shaking losses if you're a freshman quarterback.
100%. My loser is pretty simple. It's Texas, top to bottom. I didn't think that they were great. I thought they were a very good team that had been handling business. But when I watched them play, I was never overly impressed. Even in the Oklahoma game, I mean, Oklahoma with half a pulse on offense in the first half makes that a much different ball game. The Mississippi State game, close going into halftime. Mississippi State had a lot of chances in that ball game, didn't capitalize. It was a game that I thought they would lose, but at least be somewhat competitive in. I didn't think the game was all that competitive. I truly didn't believe the game was all that competitive. I know it got a little close there in the fourth quarter, but never for a second did I think that game was going to flip, kind of like the Georgia-Alabama game did. I always have faith that Kirby and those guys would win that ball game. But the biggest thing, the losing part of this, is the quarterback situation. How do you look Quinn Ewers in the eyes in that meeting, on Monday, when he's coming back in, his body's beat up, he's doing everything he can to get back on the field, and you replace him with Arch? How do you do that to Arch, throw that kid in that situation? Because if you watched him play, he looked good. He's made some throws, but he had freshman mistakes against Louisiana Monroe. He had freshman mistakes against Mississippi State. He hadn't played well enough for you to throw him in that situation. It was a desperate move from Sark, and I think it can fracture the team a little bit, because you can never really look at your coach the same again after that. You can have a good relationship. Y'all have to move forward. You're getting paid a ton of money. There's no quitting on the season, all that good stuff. But you're not going to look at him the same after that, and I think it was no reason for that. If you were going to lose, at least lose with some pride, take your lumps and get out of there. I think that was an unnecessary step that can have some lingering effects.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, Kai. I still can't believe he did it.
Yeah.
I can't believe he did it. I know that he was 5 for 11 for 11 yards and 1 interception, but you really thought Arch was going to be able to step in a game against Georgia like that, down by how much they were down by, 23-0, and be able to will you back into the game? It was just foolish, man. It was foolish, and everybody wants to say, well, maybe it was deserved. It lit a spark under Quinn. He played better in the second half, but no, man. You don't do that to your guy who you stood by for 3 straight years at this point. I just thought it was not just a bad move. I thought it was in bad taste, brother. Thought it was in bad taste.
This isn't a Lagway Merck situation where it's well warranted. You were undefeated, number 1 team in the country. Take your lumps and get out of
College
there.
Football playoff national championship favorite probably last week before we started playing football. Yeah, just foolish, dumb as hell. But we need to go ahead and grab a break. When we come back, we'll talk with Emory Hunt from CBS Sports HQ.
What are y'all looking forward to the most? To me, of course, it's 12. It got to be Ja, what he's going to do. Of course, that's what the natural answer is.
Of course.
That ain't my answer, bro. I watched a new batch of Zach Edey videos.
I was saying.
So, yeah.
Hey, I'm ready for this Zach Edey Walker Kessler part 2.
Only 2 4 quarters in his ass with him.
Yeah.
Dude, I want Zach Edey to pan out and be good so bad, bro. And nothing makes me think he's not going to pan out. You hear people talk about all the time how all it takes is one guy to zig where everybody else is zagging, and he can break the league. We may see a dude who, and I know people, nobody tries to slow me down with this more than Jason Smith, my good friend Jason Smith of the Jason and John Show. he tries to slow me down big time, but bro, I do not care. If I see Zach Edey come out here, man, bust Walker Kessler ass again, it's gonna be hard fetch trying to get me off the Zach Edey train for real. I'm going to Meineke and saying, take the goddamn brakes off. I'm Fred Flintstone in this bitch, bro.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
It's going to come down to also team success.
Hey, can we stop blowing the yard?
I mean, this is so rude.
Come on, we're doing a show over here. Not even a wave or nothing. Well, I love driving through your neighborhood, by the way, Brevin, because I waved to so many people today. And I initiated the wave. I didn't even let them wave first.
You waved first.
I waved first. They're like, oh, hey, there's that nice man in that big-ass truck.
He's so friendly. Well, I don't like that he's going to blow all that stuff onto mine. That's all right. When it's time for me to clean my yard, you know what I do?
Huh. Blow it right on back?
Blow it right on back. So we got a little blowing battle. Hold on.
Hey.
Whoa, hold on. Pause. Hold on. Hold on now.
Yeah, we'll just edit that out. Yeah. That's fine.
Put that on loop.
That's going to be our promo this week, probably.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Emory Hunt founded Football Game Plan in 2007. He works for CBS Sports, does CBS Sports HQ. He does college football and NFL analysis. But Emory, how's it going, man? Thanks for joining.
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate y'all bringing me on.
Yes, sir. Now we have you are also a former Louisiana Lafayette running back. We have a couple of linemen. We were talking about it off the air. We have a couple of linemen. We just need 3 more. Get it together. You got a couple of plays in you? I know I got like 5 plays in me left.
I mean, you got 1 goal line carry. I got to keep it as simple and efficient as possible with these knees and this lower back.
Yeah, no. I hear you. Now, real quick, I do have to break down there is some news of the day in the NFL. We have DeAndre Hopkins heading to the Chiefs. Holler at me about that move. It feels like 3 years in a row the Chiefs have tried to go at least midseason, go find a wide receiver. It was Kadarius Toney. They had somebody else here relatively recently, but now you have DeAndre Hopkins heading over. I think the best of the bunch, but obviously a little bit older. What do you think that's going to do for the Chiefs, who have not been that great through the air so far this year, where Patrick Mahomes has 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions?
It's going to slide guys down into their more natural position. I think it helps out their passing game because now you got a bona fide number 1. You have your rookie wild card piece in Xavier Worthy. Juju Smith-Schuster is still a solid slot guy, in my opinion. And you know about the tight end position where they're deep and talented and versatile. I think it helps out their offense significantly. I'm just surprised that the Tennessee Titans made that intra-conference move to send him to another AFC team.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And but honestly, at the same time, you just sort of look at what the Titans are dealing with right now. Will Levis, give me your thoughts there real quick, because I am in the state of Tennessee. I know we have some listeners that follow the Titans. Is it? I think I am out until otherwise proven to be back in or back on the Will Levis bandwagon. But he's not giving us a whole lot of reason to be there.
Now, there's a lot of reasons for Titans fans to be big-time college football fans this season because it's a ton of good quarterbacks that can help them out. And Levis, to me, is just too inconsistent to be considered the full-time, hey, we can trust you starter. He's what I would call a spot starter. You know, he could be a good QB2, a guy that you could trust for that 2 to 3 game stretch to get you through an injury. But in terms of being a full-time starter, you guys know this, like starters to me, you know, is trustworthy throughout the course of a season. Can I trust you consistently? That's usually the difference between your starter and your starter in waiting or reserve.
Awesome. You're a former player, and I kind of wanted to ask you how that shaped your scouting philosophy. When you're watching, when you're evaluating, how do you feel your experience as a player and receiving coaching and being through that lens has helped you as an analyst and as a scout and a talent evaluator?
You know, that's a great question because I think a lot of folks, when you say, hey, I played, you know, at whatever level, right? Whether you played at NAIA, whether you are a Heisman Trophy candidate, whether you played in the NFL, right? The people take it as a oh, so you're saying I didn't play, so I don't know the game.
Right.
Like, no, I think, you know, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I feel like we all kind of have the same sentiment where when you say you played, it's just a acknowledgement of the experiences that gives you a certain perspective on what a locker room is like, what, you know, scouting reports look like, what breaking down film looks like, what, you know, analyzing someone's weaknesses or strengths or whatnot, what all of that looks like, what, you know, goes through the mind of a player. Like that perspective matters. Like, you know, even from as simple as, you know, this guy's having a bad game. It's not because he's a bad player. maybe he broke up with his girlfriend early in the week. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes things like that could happen. Or I remember being in the press box covering a Giants game, and obviously how the press box is, and oh, why he didn't cut it back, and I'm like that's great from where we are sitting, bird's eye view, but on the field you got the helmet on and everything moving like this in front of you, like so you got to make that decision like quickly. Things happen fast, so I think for me it has helped me have perspective, and we've all played with guys that you can say, oh yeah, this guy is a legit NFL player, or this dude is good and he ends up going playing, whether it's in the CFL or play some arena ball or whatnot. So you knew talent is everywhere. And, even when you played against other opponents, you're like, wow, this dude's pretty good. And he may go undrafted, but he's not a bad player. Mm-hmm. So we know about the numbers game. We know how political the NFL draft process can be. And we know there's more good players out there than what you see in the SEC or what you see at the FBS level or just what you see make the NFL. There's, I've always been a proponent for, the NFL could have its own 32-team developmental league. You bring 90 guys at camp, you cut 45, there's your development team right there, right? And so all of those things kind of help shape my experience to where I look at it from a big picture perspective. I do understand that, not everybody can get through that door of the NFL. It's like fitting a bus through a door. Some of the buses is going to get in, but a lot of the bus is going to be left outside. That doesn't mean you're not a good player. And I try to bring that perspective of the former athlete into my scouting and into my analysis, into my broadcasting, just kind of help be that voice for what we all probably used to watch TV and scream at, like, why would he say that when that's not really true? Right. I try to bring that voice to the forefront.
Now, holler at me about this, because Kyron and I sometimes get a little bit bogged down and bothered by some of the advanced analytics out there, the EPA per play, everything like that. Where do you stand on those types of metrics and how you can apply them to sort of analyzing the game?
That's another great question, because I like it. I like to think of it like this. We remember what they call analytics and what they call all of the advanced stuff. We used to call scouting reports, right? I mean, when number 11 is on the field or comes into the game, they're likely to line up in these three formations, which means they're likely to run these particular plays. Not just call it a different name or whatnot, but it's cool. It's something that has always been in the game, and I just try to keep it from a broadcast perspective as simple as possible, because as much as people love to think they want to know the ins and outs and the nuances and the intricacies and all the verbiage and all that cool stuff like that, they don't want to know that. There's a reason why people watch CNN and Fox as opposed to C-SPAN, because it's entertainment, right? They want to be entertained. They don't want to be informed. Yeah, if you learn something along the way, cool, but they just want to be entertained. They think they want to be taught and informed, but they really don't. And so I try to keep that perspective, like, okay, how can I say this as simple as possible to where they understand it, to where they can digest it, and to those that know the game and understand the nuances on the intricacies can pick up on what I'm putting down and says, oh, I know he's trying to say, I know what he means, but he's saying it as simple as possible, because again, you got to talk to everybody and not to just that niche few that's sitting right there in the front.
Yep.
You worn many hats over your career. How did you kind of land where you are now, and how have those experiences shaped you, right? Like, you've founded your own company before, you've been a part of football teams before, you've been through the ringer. So how did you get here, and what did you learn on the way?
Man, listen, my college career was cut short with due to injury. So that's one perspective, right? The injured athlete, that you had it and then you lose it, and it's like, dang, you're fighting. You're still trying to find a way to get that feeling back of what gives you that feeling of playing and preparing and all of that stuff, right? So right after college, I went into coaching. I coached at my old high school in New Orleans, McMain High School. And then, you start listening to other people that say, hey, man, you finished college, man. Why are you coaching? Like, why don't you go get a real job? So you think, yeah, I probably should use my degree, which was in broadcasting, and, my minor's in theater. But good luck trying to find that right out of school. And who do you contact, right? So I ended up taking this sales job, and the football part helped with that, because now I'm being, there was rankings, like, And I remember when, like 2 months into the job, I'm dead last. I'm like, oh no, this gonna change. Like now that I know they're keeping score, the next year I'm number 1. And so it's like instantly, that was cool just to be competitive. And then Katrina hit, moved me up to New York City area, and I'm still doing my thing as a recruiter. But it's like, man, I kind of miss football. I need to do something about it. So I started a website in 07, footballgameplan.com, where we just talking ball. And my whole thing was with football game plan, because here's the biggest part of the whole journey, was the fact that you're watching these pre-game shows. It's like 4 hours long. And by that time, I'm still a fan of the New Orleans Saints. Before as you become the professional, you zoom out and you lose your fandom and you be objective, right? But at the time, before I started football game, I'm still a fan of the Saints. So I'm watching these 4-hour pre-game shows only for them to talk about the Saints maybe for 20 seconds. And it's like, oh, they're playing on the road, they're going to lose. And I'm like, that don't tell us nothing. Like I watched this whole 4-hour show and they didn't say jack about so I'm like, man, I got to do something. And then that draft class was the 06 year was the Vince Young class. And I was adamant, like, Vince Young can play. And you're watching these shows and they tell you like, nah, he can't play. This guy is better than this guy. I'm like, we just watched one of the greatest games of college football history. You mean tell me that dude can't do the same thing against these NFL players that he's going to see on Sunday that he's playing against in his ball? Like, come on. So I was like, instead of me just arguing with my homeboy on three-way, let's start a website. So we did that. That way we gonna cover everything, from the NFL to women's tackle football. And we treated everybody equally. And so we started doing that. 09, I was like, people like to watch stuff more than they read. So I started the YouTube channel. Nobody was doing it at the time. And so that started, like, we started giving everybody 5-minute videos of, if you want to watch a 5-minute breakdown of the Bengals versus the Titans, you're going to get that here. You won't get it on any major network. And so people started saying, man, at least he talking about our team, sharing it around on a different message board. So people was locked in and he started to support it, and the numbers started to grow and grow and grow. And that's how I was getting my 10,000 hours. And then 2011, I started podcasting when nobody was doing that. Because I was like, no, this is a cool addition. We could do a live show on Saturday morning and have people call in. And we did that. And so it was kind of cool to do both things. It was still getting like a lot of flack for it. It was like, oh, you on YouTube. Oh, you podcasting. Like, you're not on TV. You're not on radio. But now you look at everybody podcasting on YouTube, right? And so I want to say, like, doing that and still doing my thing. I want to say 2015, I got hit up by one of the owners of the women's tackle football team, the DC Divas. He was like, hey man, I saw you do previews for women's games. Would you like to do one for our playoff game against the Boston Renegades? I was like, sure, why not? He said, it's gonna be on TV. So we're excited about it. I was like, hey, do they have commentators for the game? He said, let me check. So he called me back in about 20 minutes. Like, no, I told him you would be great because you covered the women's game. You could talk. So I get down there right outside of FedEx Field, and we do the game. And I'm with Jeremy Huber, who was on Sirius NFL Sirius XM, and I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. I'm calling my first game. The producer said we did a great job, and next thing you know, he hit me up like, hey, we got these high school All-American games at Towson. Would you want to be, do that when you want to do that? I was like, cool. Did that. We then he kept getting promoted because he was like, hey, I got these Georgetown games. Are you interested in doing college football? I'm like, yes. So we started doing that. So now I'm like full players doing college games, and then CBS had me on as a guest on the Cannell and Bell show. I want to say in 2018. As a fill-in. It was like early in the morning. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I jump on the show, and then afterwards, they're like, hey man, you want to come on weekly at the same time every Thursday morning? I'm like, why not? And then that just parlayed into the full-time thing with CBS. So every step of the way, I was just doing my own thing, but it gave me the perspective of covering everything. So that's why you kind of see me do the CFL and UFL and European League of Football, because one, I understand there's talent everywhere, and guys that were good in college are still good football players. They just may not play in the NFL. And also like that groundwork of, man, like really building and kind of seeing ahead of the curve of what's the new thing is going to be, like YouTube and podcasting, and jumping out there first, and then just kind of continue to be who I've always been, to cover everything equally. And that's kind of got me where I am.
So as an analyst, I did see this. I learned this about you before I had you on. Did you get to call a Bishop Sycamore game? Is that a thing? Yeah, holler at me about that, please.
Man, this was during the COVID when we did remote broadcast, right? So I was like, I was like, cool, that's keeps you active because we weren't going to games, and I was like, yeah, I call. We did a couple of high school games with Flow Football, and so I saw this on the schedule, and I was like, all right, cool. And then the week of, we're like, we do every, hey coach, for high school is like easier because like, hey coach, what's your roster?
Yeah.
Who are some of the key players that we should watch? Who's getting recruited heavily? And so I remember doing research. I couldn't find anything on Bishop Sycamore, and then we hit the coach up, like, hey man, who's the guys, and we didn't hear anything back. And now it's 3 days out, and then here comes like, hey coach, man, you got a roster? Like, we couldn't find nothing. And he was like, he never got back to me. I want to say day of, he got back to me and was like, hey, we gotta here's the roster. And it was like on an index card, like taken from a photo from a phone. I'm like, man, and the team they were playing was like a stud team,
right,
out of Ohio. I think Hoban, I think it was called something like that. And he had a dynamic running back who ended up going to Merrimack. And so I'm excited for the game because he was like, we got like 6 5-stars, which didn't make sense because you can't have that many 5-stars.
Right.
And so after so we get the roster the day of, and then the first drive, I'm like, so going into commercial break after the first drive where the Ohio team just went right down the field, I was like, I told the play-by-play guy, I was like, bro, these dudes terrible, man.
Yeah.
Like, there's
Something's
no
up
way.
here.
This doesn't make sense. Like, there's no way on LeBron James internet that these dudes are like mismatched helmets. The quarterback was like the quarterback that he built up to say was like this super 5-star getting recruited by all this, and he had to been like 6'1", 120. I'm like, bro, none of this makes sense. And then they just get killed in the first quarter. I'm like, man, they got to call this game. Like, dudes getting, they weren't getting hurt. They were getting like murdered. Like, dudes looked like they were dead out there. I'm like, dog, like these dudes, like, do they have enough people to finish the game? Like,
and they didn't have any trainers. They didn't have any trainers out there taking care of.
I'm like, man, this. So then the following week was the game that everybody focused on, the ESPN game. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh, snap, this same team. Oh, I mean, it was 2 weeks later. I was like, yo, this is the same team. Man, this team about to get murdered by IMG. Like, and so I was like, dang, that's crazy. So yeah, it was a wild story, but I knew something was up when we couldn't get in contact with the coach until the day of, and I got that DM from him with the roster. I'm like, nah, bro, this ain't it, dog. Like, like this ain't something up with this. You know what I'm saying?
So I can't imagine you were surprised on the back end. I mean,
not at all. Not
Roy Johnson. He had that thing going there for a second, but people caught on. Now, I can only assume as a former running back, you're a run the rock enthusiast, right? I mean, you have to be a run the rock enthusiast.
I'm always playing petty online too with regards to the running game,
right?
Because I know that's something I know people are anti-run game, anti-running backs, and it just happened to pair with the analytics folks. So
yeah. Now, with a Group of Five podcast, we always talk about Ashton Genty at Boise State. What do you see from him, man? And what do you think his game's going to translate like to the NFL, to the National Football League when he gets there?
He's getting fantastic blocking, number one. Like, Boise does a fantastic job of clearing out lanes. He also has great contact balance. So, he's explosive. He's running through contact. He breaks a lot of tackles. I personally would like to see him evade a couple of guys more so than, like, you don't have to always run through 8 defenders. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can at least make 2 of them miss, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I love that he's built like the what they don't understand about the running back position. Because I've always been size is not a skill. If you're good enough, you're big enough. What Barry Sanders did had nothing to do with his size. It just made it look cooler. Same thing with Randy Moss. Nothing what Randy Moss did was about him being 6'5". Him being 6'5" just made everything he did just look dope. You know what I'm saying? So Genty being 5'8", 217 is cool because the low center of gravity is tougher to get him down, and he has the explosive burst and acceleration to really get out in front of the gates early. So now, even if he may be a 4-5 guy, he gets to his 4-5 faster than most people get to their whatever 4-3 or whatever, right? So if you build up a lead, he's not going to get run down. And so I like that part of his game. I just like the fact that teams know he's getting the football and they can't stop him. And that is hard as hell to really grasp that concept of, man, this dude is getting the ball and he's running for 200 plus yards a game. Like, that's just crazy. Even though, you know, you may have someone that's probably a stylistically or aesthetically pleasing or better looking back, but Genty, you can't argue with the results. You can't argue with how dominant he's been, knowing he is getting the football and you still cannot stop it.
100%. Before we get you out of here, I got to ask you one thing, because I've seen you a lot over the years and we've had some different opinions and a lot of agreements as well. The quarterback position this year is extremely polarized. Can you give me your top 3 guys and what you think about those players?
I give you my top 5. It was funny because I was waiting to, I live in the petty. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was going to retweet this maybe like 2 weeks ago, but I was like, nah, I'm gonna sit on it a little bit. So, right. So August, I was on CBS Sports Network on their Inside College Football show, and actually my top 5 college quarterbacks coming into the season. And I was like, Shador, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Caden Salter, and Brady Cook. I'm a big Brady Cook guy. And so obviously that was the discussion. Like, man, where's yours? Where's Beck? And to me, all of those quarterbacks embody the things that I like about the quarterback position, and it has nothing to do with the physical traits. It's about how you handle pressure. As pressure versus the defense and pressure of the situation, because situational pressure is what separates the good NFL quarterbacks from the average NFL quarterbacks. And I say average in terms of like, guys that you can kind of win with, but when it comes down to if the other team has a guy that's not afraid of pressure, you're never going to win, And so when you look at those guys, you look at guys that can, it doesn't matter what is going on. We talk about Shador Sanders and how he gets beat up down in, down out, right? But he's out there making throws as if he didn't just get the crap knocked out of him the play before, and making insane game-changing plays in the big. And this goes back to Jackson State, and I always tell this story because it's like because I didn't see much of him in high school, and I just thought it was going to be a daddy ball situation when he got to Jackson State. Of course, he going to be the starter. We watch how the spring went, and it was like, they had Jalen Jones, I believe, at the quarterback, but Shador is going to start in the fall. And so the first game, I'm like, man, this dude actually, like, he's doing stuff that senior quarterbacks don't do. And I was like, wow, he actually knows where to go with the football. And then as the season went on, you just said, like, man, he's making really good decisions. And that was something he built on his sophomore season when they, went undefeated and won the SWAC as well. It's like, man, this dude is actually, he reminds me a lot of Joe Burrow. Same thing with Cam Ward when in 2021, when he was at Incarnate Word, I'm like, it feels like I'm watching Steve McNair again in terms of how, like, nothing phases him. Like the clock running down, like he's just playing like he's toying with defenses. And he did it in the Southland, and he did it at Washington State, and he's doing it currently at Miami. Now he's improved from Washington State to Miami. I think he's doing a better job of being a little bit more judicious on when and where he throws the football. It's still a little cavalier at times, but that's what makes him him, know? And then Milroe, it's the same thing about like with Anthony Richardson, where, you see the physical traits, you see the explosiveness, you see the athleticism, you know that he is a tough-minded dude. Again, getting benched against South Florida. He wasn't playing well up until he got benched, right? Even the year before, he was like, man, he's kind of like erratic. Then that season, he was up and down, erratic, got benched. Then after that, he locked in. And then we saw him in the SEC title game against Carson Beck. We're like, yo, he's outplaying the dude that they say is a guy, and consistently. And so he was able to build on that. We saw what he did this season to start the season. He's still a little bit up and down, but he's better than he was when he started. So it shows you he's going that way, right? He's trending upwards. I just feel like somebody like Caden, Liberty as a whole, has just been forgotten about. They may finish undefeated and nobody's talking about Liberty because I guess they're not blowing people out like they were last year. But Caden Salter is still someone that's, you know, a good, efficient quarterback. And Brady Cook is, it depends on which day of the week and which Missouri fan you talk about. They either love him or they hate him. But he reminds me a lot of Andy Dalton when he was at TCU. You know, just a dude that just finds ways to make a way. And there's something to be said about that and what he's able to do. But yours is a solid quarter. Beck is solid. I like Beck a little bit more than yours. But if I had to, like, give me those guys that can, you know, that can find a way to win, I want those guys more so than anything.
Yeah, and Brady Cook showed some toughness this past weekend, got an MRI, came back to the stadium, willed them to victory, it was 2 scoring drives right after that, and he was scrambling all around. I'm like, it's out of his mind.
But let him throw an incomplete pass in the first game this week and watch how quickly they turn on him.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Now, final thing, you do your G5, Group of 5 rankings every single week, and usually, obviously, at the top of it is Boise State. You have Army, Navy after that, then Liberty. But who do you think? Let's just sort of pick a team here. Who do you think is going to get that college football playoff spot out of the Group of 5 this year?
Man, listen, the way this schedule is setting up in this season, it would surprise. See, and I just brought this up, the whole Justin Fields, Russell Wilson thing. It's about red herrings, right? See, the red herring here is there's only one team worthy of getting in. That's what they want you to focus on.
Right.
But what they don't realize, like, some of these conferences about to cannibalize themselves, and Army is going to go undefeated. Navy is probably going to go undefeated until they play Army the second time, which means both teams would have beaten Notre Dame. Then you got Boise State. If they can get past UNLV, they could run the table to only a close loss to Oregon. So you could see a situation where 3 G5 teams get in. Because think about the scenario that could happen where you have Army goes undefeated, they win the AAC, and they're going to continue to, as you win, you're going to continue to get ranked higher and higher. Right. And so the last game, the Army-Navy game, doesn't count toward the conference standings. So if they lose that game, if both games are close, right, and they lose the second game, Navy could say, man, we beat a ranked Notre Dame team. We beat the G5 champ Army. Right. And you know what I'm saying? Like, so they have that going for them. And it's election year, so you can play up the military. Like you can do all kind of stuff, right? And Boise can win, and Boise going to keep. They may have the Heisman winner. Tulane's still sitting out there. In the AAC as well. If they could, they obviously won't get to the championship, or they could get to the championship game potentially. But man, there's a way for 3 G5 teams to get in if they keep it honest and use the eye test and not justify a 5-loss Georgia team getting in, right? Because they play in the SEC. Well, yeah, you rank all 15 SEC teams in the top 5. Of course, he's gonna beat a ranked team. What could throw this thing off completely, though, to be honest, and no one's talked about this yet. If Vandy goes out there this weekend and beats Texas. Now, do you take Vandy seriously? Because they would have beaten number 1 Alabama, number 5 Texas, and they would have still Tennessee. There's a doomsday scenario that people are not.
It's been chaotic though already. I can agree with that fact. Now, 3 teams from the Group of 5 getting in. I would certainly hope that could happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I would love to see it.
They'll justify the 8-4 LSU or 3-loss Georgia, Bama, because again, but you guys know this, nobody wants to face any one of these triple option teams
absolutely
on a week's notice. Good luck.
And the way Navy's playing too, they drop back and throw passes now. They go wing T, triple option, then they can get into the spread. That's tough.
If you know the day, you gotta.
My alma mater, Memphis, had to deal with that. They know how hard it is to defend.
And they almost came back. And Memphis is another one that's sitting out there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I'm glad. I wish how it should be. Every conference champion should get a representative, and then you could play around with you could put all your SEC teams in your at-large bids. That's what they want to do anyway. But at least let these conferences earn their way to get to the postseason. You know why? Because we've seen it done at every other level of college football since Ben. So it's not like it hadn't been done before.
Yep, I hear you. Well, Emory, I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, so we'll let you roll.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. He is from CBS Sports HQ and CBS Sports in general. And also make sure you check out Football Game Plan. He's Emory Hunt.
Did the offense figure something out halfway through that game and halfway through the season? Is it fixed now?
During the post game, they did the same thing last year. In the second half of the season, the end of the season, we're an elite offense nationally. He's like, I hope that this is that it's happening again.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at it, Seth, 24-38, 320 and a touchdown, no interceptions, no turnovers. Mario obviously had a heck of a game, 22 carries, 183 and a school record tying 4 touchdowns. Your 3 top guys had great games, I would say. You have 4 games coming up here where I feel like the offense has an opportunity to really turn it on and set up what can be a big pivotal game down in New Orleans.
Tune in to Tigers Untapped with TJ Willis and Trey Lasley every Wednesday at 3 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
When you look at the AAC and all the expectations for this team and what they needed to get done, you have Tulane in the way, who's undefeated in conference, but you have a chance to go beat them at the end of the season. I very much expect this team to be 10-1 going into that game against Tulane.
Right.
But when we look at the 2 teams that are also ahead of you in the standings, you have Army and you have Navy. And neither one of those teams play each other in the regular season, because I don't know why the AAC decided that won't be a conference game, but whatever. It is what it is. But you just look at those teams' path, man, and it seems like even if this Tiger team goes 11-1, they may not actually get to the AAC championship. So you're going to have to hope for 2 losses from Navy or the 1 loss from Army to North Texas on the road, and then you're going to have to hope you win a tiebreaker.
Tune in to On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, back in on G5 Classified. Time to get to our G5 check-in, and let's start with a massive game in MetLife. We have the Navy midshipman, number 24 in the country, going into MetLife to play Notre Dame. They are 12.5-point dogs, Navy is. But Navy's been absolutely rolling with Blake Horvath at quarterback. That we've talked with Brian Newberry in the past. They've switched this up. They have wing T principles, triple option principles. They can get into spread and throw the ball a little bit. Notre Dame has definitely been a ground control team. There's no doubt about it. Play some defense, try to grind the game out. The best way, and I want your opinion on this, I think the best way for Navy to be able to go win this game or have a chance to win this game, I think you need to put a couple on them early. Go score on them at will, show that you can score on them, and make them play from behind, because I don't think Notre Dame's all that good at doing that.
Yeah, 100%. That's the way to go. And it lends to their offense too, because then they can bleed the clock, right? It's going to be hard to stop it. Even if you keep them out of the end zone, they're going to eat up some clock with those drives and just keeping the first down sticks moving. And the way the clock works now, man, the games are flying by. I know that we have a million TV timeouts, but the actual gameplay is flying by pretty fast, especially for those type of teams. So I think Navy has a realistic chance to win this ball game. This is a game to me where Riley Leonard has to earn his money, right? I know a lot of people have talked about him. I know that Nate Tice from, I think it's with Yahoo Sports, now had him as his number 1 overall player on his big board at one point. He needs to earn that type of. I see your face.
That's nasty, man. I'm sorry. Yeah. That's nasty as hell. I saw Colin Cowherd say some shit like that too about Riley Leonard. It grosses me out. And I know I know he's from where you're from. I understand that.
Listen, I thought it was asinine as well. And I love Riley. I think the kid is going to be a very good ball player. And I think he'll play well, but he has to earn it this week. This is the type of game. And it's funny that this has become a showcase game, but it is. You have Navy that's undefeated coming in to play you. Everybody's going to be watching them. You're Notre Dame. Everybody's going to be watching you regardless. He has to earn his keep this week. And for him to do that, he's going to have to make good decisions. This is not a game where you can afford to have those costly interceptions or a fumble or a miscommunication where you're off the field on third down because it might be 8 minutes before you get the ball back. You can't make mistakes in a game like this. So this is a game where I think he has to play well. And Navy has to go out there, like you said, and impose a will from the get-go. And if they can get up early, I like their chances because they're going to chew this damn clock up.
Yeah, and here's the thing with Navy's offense. Like, I've had this debate, who's got the better offense, Navy or Army. I think Army has a more well-rounded team. They have a better defense and all that. But I think the Navy offense is really hard to defend against. Because think about, like, you line up like they're about to run the triple option, then they spread you out and have two wide receivers to each side. It's just like you have to have some really good guys in your secondary who can use their eyes, be smart with their eyes, and that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And don't forget, Notre Dame's going to be down Benjamin Morrison. He's out for the rest of the year. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. People are going to write Navy off in this game. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Now, my Memphis Tigers are still kicking. They won 52-44 over North Texas. And I will remember the name, not that I didn't before because I called his games at Northwest Mississippi Community College. I'll remember the name DT Sheffield for the rest of my life. That guy was ridiculous. Did you see the first two plays for North Texas, first two offensive plays, 75 yards on a jet sweep for DT Sheffield, then 75 yards on a deep crossing route for DT Sheffield. That was their first two plays, 150 yards all purpose for DT Sheffield. Impressive as hell. But Memphis was able to pull it out in the end. And their offense got going. Seth Hennigan was solid. Mario Anderson Jr., 22 carries for 183 yards and a couple of touchdowns, or 4 touchdowns, actually, to be exact. I think he was Offensive Player of the Week in the AAC. So Memphis is still rolling. But the problem we're running into now with Memphis is that Navy loss is just going to come back to bite them because Army and Navy have very, very easy schedules the rest of the way in the American Athletic Conference, and Navy in particular. Yeah, it's a little bit harder. They're going to have to play Tulane. They could lose to Tulane. But at the same time, they have the tiebreaker over Memphis. And I think that there's a discussion to be had here where Memphis could be, let's just talk about it, 11-1 by the time we get to, who's going to get into the American Athletic Conference Championship. If they beat Tulane on Thanksgiving Day to end the year, sit there at 11-1, there's a realistic possibility they could be 11-1 and not be in the American Athletic Conference Championship. And that is nuts to me. That is absolutely asinine. And then when you look at like the scenarios and everything, let's say Army loses a game to North Texas in the last two because Army's 6-0 in conference or 7-0, whatever it is, 6-0. So let's say they lose to North Texas going on the road. You would have sort of a tiebreaker there. And the tiebreakers are ridiculous. It's about who's going to be ranked and who's in the college football playoff ranking. And then I think what it would come down to, if North Texas has that loss and Memphis, or if Army has a loss to North Texas and Memphis goes 11-1, it would come down to, I read the AAC rulebook, the composite score of Connolly, S&P Plus, strength of record, FPI, BPI, whatever. There's just like 5 different things they make a composite score of, and whoever's highest would get into the American Athletic Conference Championship. And I just think it's insane. And we're seeing that around the country now because divisions have been dropped. You look at the ACC right now, you have Miami, you have Clemson, and you have SMU all sitting at the top of that conference undefeated, and they don't play each other. None of them play each other the rest of the year. Like this is going to get wild down the stretch. And I know that we hated divisions for by the end of the year, especially in the Big Ten, you'd end up with, I don't fucking know. You'd have Ohio State on one side, then whoever won the Big Ten West, usually Iowa at 8-4 playing them. Like that got to be a little bit annoying. But I think we're going to see some pretty, some unintended consequences from dropping divisions in a lot of these big conferences.
100%. The Big Ten, I cover Oregon, and they sent us the Big Ten tiebreakers. And there's a scenario where Oregon is 11-1, Indiana's 11-1, Ohio State's 11-1. I believe Penn State is 11-1. There's like 4 or 5 teams there, and the 5th place tiebreaker is from some analytics company, whoever is their top in their analytics company, and it's crazy. So I do think there's going to be,
as long as it's not PFF, we're good.
It's not PFF, I know that, but it's funny because you look at it, like you said, everybody was tired of 11-0 or 11-1 Ohio State or 12-0 Michigan versus 9-3 Purdue, who doesn't score any points. We were sick of that. But I think people are going to be super upset because a lot of these teams, like you said, have easier schedules the rest of the way. And even if they do drop one to the teams that we're talking about, they're going to be in scenarios where they probably will win out And we'll see some of this stuff come into fruition. So it's going to be a weird time in college football, and we're living in the weirdest time.
All right, now we're definitely going to get to the Group of 5 game of the week. We know what that's going to be, but one of the guys that's going to be participating is Ashton Jeanty, and you were participating in his Zoom press conference today. I think we got he's got 1,248 yards. He's outpacing Barry Sanders by 92. I think we found the reason. He's a big Boss Man D'Lo fan. That's what he bumps before the game.
Yeah, that's funny. We were in there for about 45 minutes. So shout out to Boise State for giving, people that much time to be in there with him. And shout out to Ash for answering those questions because, we got multiple questions and a lot of people came back 2 or 3 times. So shout out to them for that. But that was a funny question because he was like, it was funny because I think he was looking at me. We kind of laughed because we were the only one of us in there, if you know what I'm trying to say. And
right.
He's like, the guy asked him, what do you listen to before the game? He's like, I've listened to that Boss Man D'Lo, and I kind of laughed. So we got a good laugh out of that. But that's funny because you look at the way he runs, he looks like a guy that's playing some Boss Man D'Lo in the locker room.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like there was somebody who said they're like Boss Man D'Lo. That's I formation music.
Yeah,
like that's not that you can't spread it out. We're not going to any like air raids concepts. We're not doing the run and shoot with that. We got to get in the I formation, run, stretch, and power every damn play. That's what we're looking at when it comes to Boss Man D'Lo, but I got a kick out of that. Now, the Group of 5 game of the week, of course, we're going to go Friday, number 17, Boise State on the road at UNLV. Obviously, it'll be at Allegiant Stadium. They're going to try to pack that thing out. I am happy for Barry Odom, who was one of the first guests on our show with us right here on the G5 Classified podcast, good friend of the show. But what he's been able to do at UNLV is nothing short of amazing. You lose your starting quarterback after a historic year last year. You get another one in. He leaves because of NIL issues, and the guy behind him somehow is even better. And this defense is still playing at a high level. What I'm looking for in this game is I want to see, one, can UNLV stop the run and stop Ashton Jeanty, not let him get a bunch of yards after contact like everybody else has struggled to do this year, including Oregon. But if UNLV is consistent with that, I want to see if Boise State has any type of counter. Do they have a counter? Can Maddox Madsen start to drop back? Do they have some weapons on the outside that they can go make some things happen with? This is going to be an interesting sort of cat and mouse game, a little bit of a chess match back and forth if Ashton Jeanty is not getting the same type of production he's been getting week in, week out, which I kind of expect. I expect UNLV to bottom up a little bit better than everybody else has.
Yeah, this game to me is going to come down to, I said in the Texas A&M LSU game, who has more dudes? And I think the answer to that question might actually be UNLV. I watched UNLV. I think Hodgson Williams is a dynamic quarterback. And, Boise State is my pick to make it to the G5 playoff spot. So I think that, they will win out. But Ricky White, I think he might be the X factor in this game. I don't think that they're going to be able to contain Ricky White. And Ashton Jeanty is going to get his, even if it's, a little bit less than we're accustomed to seeing, even if it's 150 yards and 1 touchdown instead of 203. That'll be a win for UNLV, in my opinion. And I think that UNLV has a chance to really score a lot of points on these guys because you see a guy like Ricky White. They haven't seen a guy like that yet. I don't even think that, Oregon has a ton of good receivers, but I think Ricky White might be the best receiver they've played so far this season. So if he's able to be as dynamic as I think he will be, I think he might end up being the Ashton Jeanty and Ricky White show, and who knows what happens after that. So I'm excited to see this one for sure.
And then Jacob DeJesus out of the slot. You can't forget about him, man. That guy's got some good side-to-side movement, decent route runner out of that slot position. And then I will say this about Ricky White, the one thing that really just fires me up about talking about that guy, and I know James Shebus, the special teams coordinator over there, he was at Memphis when I was there. He's an absolute psychopath. So he's always going to play the best players on special teams. Ricky White has 3 punt blocks in the last 2 games. Like they play him on special teams and he goes hard. He is their designated punt blocker. He had 2, I believe. Was it the Washington or no? It would have been the Syracuse game. 2 in the Syracuse game. Then he had 1 last game against Oregon State.
Yep.
Like this guy just does it all, man. And you talked about, who was it? Was it Silas Bolden last week that you were talking about? Where it's like he recovers the fumble in the end zone. Like, you like to see some of these players, your best players, guys that are expected to produce actually on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, show up on the stat sheet with something other than that actual production. And I think Ricky White does that in a big way, but he also shows up on the offensive side of the ball as well. Now let's get to our picks for the week. Let's start with our locks. I'm going to go with Arkansas -6.5. And this is them going to Mississippi State. Now, I will say this is kind of a tricky spot because Mississippi State's been playing actually okay football, but they've had to sort of, come back in the second half to make 2, these games look a little bit better. The one against Georgia, they played within 10, but they had to come back in the second half. The one against A&M, they had to sort of stick around, stay within 10. Michael Van Buren, the freshman quarterback for Mississippi State, definitely is a better look than Blake Shapen was, but I still think Arkansas can get it going. I think they can bottle them up. And Arkansas is in need of a big victory because they need to get to those 6 wins. I know Sam Pittman's begging to. This is a good opportunity for them to go do that.
Yep. And I'm going to go Rutgers plus 13.5. I just haven't seen anything from USC to make me believe this is going to be a blowout game. I think USC is plenty capable of doing that. If they play to their offensive capacity, I think that they can blow this team out, but I haven't seen enough consistency to bet on that. So I think with Rutgers, Kyle Monangai in that run game, he's one of the most dynamic backs in the country. I know everybody knows Ashton Jeanty and the kid Johnson up there at Iowa was getting a lot of love because he's already over 1,000 yards on the season. But Kyle Monangai is 9th in the country in rushing, and he's 9th in the country in rushing touchdowns. So I think him alone can keep this game close. But I think Rutgers plus 13.5 is a very, very solid bet. I like that as my lock of the week.
All right, now let's get into our shocks. I'm going to go number 11 BYU plus 2 at UCF. Now, UCF has played really well defensively, I think, for most of the year. Colorado got after them a fair amount. But other than that, they've been sort of locked in. They run that 3-4 look. BYU hasn't seen a whole bunch of that. They did okay with the 3-3-5 type look that Oklahoma State brings at them, but this is going to be a little bit different. But I like BYU and the BYU plus the 2 going on the road against UCF. I just think it's going to show through. They have been able to pull out wins. They have learned how to win, and I think they'll get over top.
I'm going to go Nebraska plus 25.5 against Ohio State. I think that Ohio State's a damn good football team. I think Nebraska is a solid football team. But I'm looking at the makeup of the team, and I think that Raiola and those receivers have been able to make enough plays where they can keep the team honest. And I think that Ohio State's going to score points in this game. Indiana just beat the dog shit out of Nebraska. So I know a lot of people are going to be looking at this one. I think it's going to be another blowout, but I don't think that it's going to be that bad. I think it could be a 14 to 17 point game, 10-point game, but I think Nebraska is going to play well enough. I think the defense is good enough to get off the field a few times and give their offense the ball. And I think that Raiola and those kids are good enough to keep this ball game within 25.5 points. So that's my shock of the week. I know a lot of people are going to be hammering that one the opposite way.
Yep. Now I'm gonna go to Illinois on the road against the number 1 team in the country, Oregon. Everybody wanted last week to be the letdown spot for Oregon on a Friday night in West Lafayette. I think, going back home, I really do think this is the potential trap spot. I think this is the one no one's actually talking about. Illinois can sneak up and bite you a little bit. Luke Altmaier's been really solid. That defense can play okay. Besides that Purdue game, they look like shit. Don't know what happened there. Just a weird game up and down, 50-49 in OT. But Illinois is top 35 in the country in turnover margin. They have a very underrated secondary that I think has the chance to keep up with some of the weapons on the outside and Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson and some of those guys. They're top 45 in the country in pass defense with what they've been able to accomplish so far this year. I think Illinois can keep it within the number. I still think Oregon's going to pull away to a certain extent late, probably win by 14, but I think Illinois can cover 3 touchdowns plus spread. I think they can handle that.
Yeah, I like that one. I think that's a great one. Mine is just going to be Auburn money line. I think Auburn, they played good enough to win every ball game they played, probably outside of Georgia. I think they really have had a chance to win every game with just average quarterback play. You can make a legitimate case that they would be 6-1 right now, 5-2 at the worst. So I think they're going to be desperate enough against Kentucky, and I don't think that I've seen enough from Kentucky's offense to lead me to believe they're going to be able to move the ball up and down and score on Auburn's defense. So this is a bonus pick because I think they're going to play desperate because they have to win this ball game. This is not a game they can lose because some real uncomfortable conversations are going to start happening if they were to lose this ball game. So I'm going to take Auburn money line. I think they're going to be good enough to win this one.
All right, Kai, where do they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Kyron Samuels, and you'll get everything else. Got some really cool stuff coming. I got some USC stuff. I'm going to do a piece with Justin Dietich, who was a offensive lineman, center guard there, and now he's worked his way into the start lineup for the Los Angeles Rams. So that's going to be coming out tomorrow. By the time you see this will be out, and then all the Oregon stuff will be, covering that as well. So find me there, and we'll be there. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you guys for listening as always.
Yeah, and same shit with me. G_Coon71 on X. Find me Monday through Friday, 92.9 ESPN. You can find it at 92.9ESPN.com or download the Odyssey app. Also, Tuesday on the Bluff podcast releases with Christian Fowler. That'll be at noon every single Tuesday. On the Tuesday, talk a lot of Memphis stuff there. So make sure that you just stay abreast, stay tuned with everything we have. We're going to start posting a whole lot more. We're going to have our Heisman hype rankings. We're going to have our top 5 rankings every single week in college football. So make sure you go follow our podcast at G5 Classified FB. Again, at G5 Classified FB. That's on Twitter or on X. But obviously, like, subscribe, share, do whatever you need to do. Leave a rating. Go check out bluffcitymedia.co for all the podcasts and all the articles that they put up there. But how about this? We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.